is up to 1800 degrees. So,
Carbon steel.
some versions, whatever you rate, stainless steel, various degrees of carbon. The initial heat is all it takes now. That was like it's already used half the way. It'll take a long way. We're gonna trim off one at a time.
Other types of foods involved.
You can buy it's just gives you guts. It's good for you.
Where did you want to work on it? I said that was close.
Oh yeah, I'm getting good sound.
That's more important than anything else.
It ended up getting hot, so I'm glad you took me away from it. Looked like in a couple hours.
I would have left it in there.
Do we have another?
these are the tools that you're making? This?
Yes, yeah. So this is an example of guns that were taken and moved into tools.
Yeah.
So 10 a.m. Is South a good place for you to meet or not?
Where?
Because our office is right down here on Tapia. Okay, come over. We're on a little farm. We're in an adobe house on a farm with a secula through the front yard. So I can send you
What is the actual?
the address.
FSC wants to put in A.
It is 2047. Our address is 2047. Oh, sorry, 2047. See Mike? He's filming us.
Okay. This is at 10 a.m. or 10 a.m.?
That they are having to navigate. When I went into the service, I chose to go in. I come from a military family. I chose to go in to serve my country. And my father served 26 years. And I went into college. I enlisted. And for the most part, in the beginning, my service was fine. And admittedly, I had some questions about whether or not it was something that was true to my heart, true to my spirit. But I accepted as something that I had signed on the dotted line to do. And I actually was out of the service for 3.5 years, and then I was reactivated and redeployed to Iraq. And that was the hardest part. That's where I experienced a lot of the trauma. And going back to Iraq, having been out of the service for 3.5 years and trying to put my life back together, and then having to be thrust back into war. And it destroyed me in a lot of ways. And when I came back, I was not the same. I wasn't the same when I came out the first time, but I definitely was not the same when I came back the second time. The thing is, I'll take a quick pause. I'll take a quick pause. Perfect. Thank you. So when I came back, I was dealing with a lot of issues and a lot of unfortunate, at the time I didn't recognize it as PTSD, but I was prone to violent outbursts. I had a lot of issues in addiction, and I struggled, and I attempted to commit suicide 3 times. I'm here now because I just recognized, I got the help not from the VA, but from a lot of people in the community. And the work that I do now is what helps me keep going. And so as I talk to kids about their decisions or their prospective thoughts about going into the service, it's really not about trying to demonize the military. It's more about letting them know the pros and cons, letting them know that they have a choice about their future, because a lot of the kids do not feel like they have a choice. They feel like the military is their only option. And when they're coming from an environment or a community that's fraught with violence, that's fraught with domestic violence, verbal and physical abuse, they are going to take the first thing that seems to be the best and only option. I apologize that the mic keeps going in and out. But the fact is that I recognize that there are going to be a lot of kids that do go into the service. And so part of veterans commit 22 suicides a day. That's just the factual number. Those are the reported numbers. 1 in 3 women are raped in the service. 1 in 5 men are raped in the service. And so I do talk to kids about those numbers. I talk to them about the numbers of homeless veterans, the numbers of homeless female vets, the numbers of unemployed veterans. And so the fact is that it's not that I'm against the military. I'm against what ends up happening to an individual when they go into the service and the resources that are supposed to be there for them are not available. And they are forced to then they are forced to exist within the nightmarish reality of what they've become. So another thing that thanks Jose Luis, one of the things that has helped me is being involved with the Veterans Farmer Project. I got involved with them several months ago, and I went back and forth, tried to work, that didn't work. And so I ended up with the Veterans Farmer Project, and I have to say it has been one of the most healing things for me. And all of the veterans that are involved with that project have the same thing to say. They have to say that being out there on the land, being out there in the dirt, and being a part of something that grows is one of the most healing things that we could ever get. It's something that we can never get from the VA system. It's something that we could never get from the military. You were trained to do your job in the service. You're trained to kill. You're trained to do your mission. And so to be out on the farm and be a part of positivity, construction, and to see something actually grow out of the ground versus destroying something has been an amazing gift for me. And it's something that I do bring to the kids that I talk about. And so I just want to note that if you're interested, like I mentioned, we have a table over there. You're more than welcome to get some information about who we are, what we do. In doing this project with all of the other organizers and individuals, it's allowed me to really look at, which I do on a constant level, my impact in the world and in my community and the people that I come across on a daily basis. How do I impact them? Am I impacting them in a positive manner, whether verbally or nonverbal? And the thing is that we all struggle with that on a daily basis, and we look at what goes on in our world, and we look at especially the last several days of events. And this event was something that had been organized a couple months ago, and then we had the tragedy in Orlando, and it seems like, thankfully, this is something that is here that we can come together and be a part of and actually see the men from Raw Tools literally, physically taking weapons that have been used for whatever manner and shifting them, transforming them into something that will be used to grow, to till the earth. And I feel like that's something that we have to constantly work on a daily basis, is that it's the same with our actions, it's the same with our words. How can we transform our behaviors, our words, into positive actions, into positive things that have a positive impact on other people? And it's a tough, tough thing to do. And especially as a veteran, it's a very hard struggle on a daily basis when you're having to deal with a lot of the trauma and a lot of the memories, a lot of the physical disabilities that you come back with, whether you come back with all of your limbs or you don't. You're still having to deal with a lot of the physical impact that war, that the military has taken upon you. And so for me, I find a huge spiritual connection on being a part of the Veterans Farmer Project and being with the earth and in the work that I do with kids and the work that I do sitting on the national board. And in closing, I just kind of want to put out there that Veterans for Peace is a national organization. We have over 8,000 members. We have over a couple of hundred chapters, and we are also worldwide. We have chapters in Ireland, Australia, the UK, Okinawa, and one of our newest chapters in Tijuana. So the fact is that we are getting veterans who are not only American veterans, but are international veterans who have been a part of the military and who have been impacted by the psychological, physical, and spiritual impacts of war and the destruction that it does to other people and other cultures. And so, you know, if I were to look at my personal impact, my personal impact and consequences that I've had upon others, I will never really know except for what I see on the news. I can't go back to Iraq and find those families with who I've destroyed their lives. I can't go back there and somehow do reparations. And there are a lot of soldiers who feel this way. They can't go back to Afghanistan. And so I think that's part of our struggle as veterans, is that we don't have the ability to somehow make reparations and somehow make peace with something that we had to do as our mission, yet morally recognizing that it was wrong. So the work that I do is a daily practice. It's a daily spiritual thing, and I appreciate the time that you guys have taken to come out here in the heat to see what we've been doing, to see what others are doing in the community, and to somehow maybe find some solace, find some answers, but at least be here and listen to people's stories. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monique. That's so difficult to come out in front of people and tell them about your pain and suffering, and let that side of you be known. I just wanted to take a moment between speakers to recognize all of the volunteers that we have here working today. Let's have a hand for them. Our planning board was quite large, and I see most of the people here, and also other people like Lynn Eby and the water, and other people who are volunteering their time, like David Swan doing the cooking for our meal later on. I'd like to bring another person out now. Her name is Miranda Viscoli, and she represents the New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. And you may have heard about them before because they are active in the state, and they have several kinds of programs that they bring and try to recruit people to in the whole area, this whole area of trying to contain the violence that plagues us having to do with guns. So, Miranda, do you want to come forward?
Hey, watch out. And excuse me, I'm completely losing my voice, so I hope you can hear me. I want to thank George, who this originated with an idea he had, I think, when was it, George? 6 months ago. And we all got together, and then Albino from La Placita got together, and it's been really amazing to watch this wonderful, all these different communities get together to talk about gun violence prevention, because if we want to make a change, this is where the change has to happen. I'm gonna take a risk today. I will tell you about our group, but I really don't feel like we can stand here and not acknowledge that a week ago on Sunday, 50 people were shot and killed and 53 injured simply because they were gay. I feel like we need to talk about that. When I found out about the latest mass shooting, I was actually in the airport, and I told my kids, I said, you know what, there's been another mass shooting, don't look at the images. And I looked around the airport, and nobody was looking at the televisions. Now I can understand families not, but nobody was looking at the fact that there were people gingerly carrying out bodies that may be dead or alive, and that we had just had one of the worst mass shootings in our country. And I saw everybody looking at their cell phones. So I thought, well, maybe they're looking at a different news network. No, that wasn't the case. And there are some days in gun violence prevention where you feel like we're really moving forward. Today is a day like that, where you have Raw Tools, which I think is the most genius idea ever, coming out and forging firearms into gardening tools. And it gives you hope. But on Sunday, last Sunday, a lot of us felt like we didn't have any hope. And when my daughter asked me, Mom, how many people were shot? I told her it's 50. And her next question was, how many shooters were there? And that's a really logical question, because you would assume with that many people dying or being injured, there'll be a lot of shooters. But we have these war tools in our society that are designed to kill as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, and have no business being on the streets of our city and our communities and in our streets. And I think events like today are really important. I really do. I think vigils are important. I think prayer is important. I think it's crucial right now that we really hold the LGBT community, because they are heartbroken. But I have to be honest, I cannot stand up here and say, we can't honor those victims unless we take action. If we don't take action, and if we don't hold our elected officials accountable, then shame on us. Because when it's easier in this country to buy an assault weapon than it is Sudafed, I need some Sudafed, then we have a problem. And so what I'm really asking us today is, one, let's honor those people who are shot and killed. Let's honor those people who are injured. And Chris is going to share her story, which is amazing, of what she's been through in terms of gun violence. But let's also take action. And let's refuse to allow our lawmakers to hide behind the NRA and the corporate gun lobby, and to ignore the safety of our communities. And I know we're not supposed to get political, so I promise that is all I will say, but I really think it's an important point to make. Quickly, our group, New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, we got together 3 years ago after the shooting in Sandy Hook. And I always say that I'm ashamed to say that I joined the gun violence prevention movement then, because I had no idea how bad it was. It wasn't until 26-year-olds were shot and killed, shot in their legs first so that the deranged killer could watch them suffer more, that I got on board in gun violence prevention. I work with an amazing group. The people at New Mexicans for Gun Violence are the most dedicated, intelligent group I have ever had the honor to work with. And I really appreciate every single thing they do. And basically what we do is we take a two-pronged approach to gun violence prevention. We believe in that we need to educate, and that we also need to change laws. So in terms of education, we work in the schools. We have a program that was developed by a fantastic woman in the 90s called the Student Pledge Against Gun Violence. And we go into our schools. Don't you love that sound? I just think that's so cool. So we go into schools and we talk to kids about the issue of gun violence, and they get to have a voice in this matter that really affects their lives, because we want their generation to be the generation that says gun violence stopped with our generation. And so we do amazing projects with them, and then they also choose if they want to sign a pledge that says they'll never bring a gun to school, they'll never use a gun to solve a personal dispute, and they'll convince their friends to do the same. In addition to that, we hand out a ridiculous amount of free gun locks to parents. Any community, in fact, if anybody has a gun and it's not locked up, you can go get a free gun lock right over there at our table, because we're really trying to educate parents that if there's a child in the house, they really need to lock up that firearm. Our next big project, which we're really excited about, is also with Raw Tools, where we will be doing gun buybacks throughout New Mexico and forge those firing arms to be given to community gardens. They did a gun buyback here in Albuquerque 3 years ago, and they got 900 firearms off the street. 900 firearms. So we will start in Rio Arriba County, where, as we know, there's a huge gun violence problem as well as a heroin problem, and move to Santa Fe and then move to Albuquerque, and we hope to remove a lot of unwanted guns out of our homes and out of our communities. That being said, we also work on the legislative aspect of gun violence prevention. Unfortunately, New Mexico boasts some of the weakest gun laws in the country, and we have some of the worst gun violence, and that is no accident. Our weak gun laws are hurting us. In the past 2 weeks, an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old were all shot and killed in New Mexico. We are not taking care of our young people. So our biggest push is to really see how can we start working to make sure that these numbers are reduced. It's the third leading cause of death for kids 1 through 18 in New Mexico, with 74% being done as homicide. Third leading cause of death is homicide, with 74% being done by a firearm. The second leading cause is suicide. So another program that we're really working on is making sure that parents have a safe place to put their firearm. So right now, you know, auntie might not want the firearm, grandma might not want it, and they have a suicidal kid in the home. So we're working with police and gun shops, actually, to give a safe place, an anonymous place for these firearms to go until things cool down in the home. So those are some of our programs. We have many, but forgive me, I have a horrible head cold, so I can't even think of them. So I think that's it. Come talk to us, join our team. We have a membership is free, and we need members all over the state. Right now we have about 3,000, and we're trying to get more. So thank you very much for coming, caring about this amazing issue. And I next would like to introduce, Oh, no, I wouldn't like to introduce. I mean, I would. I don't know who you are. I'd like to introduce George.
Thank you very much, Miranda. Yes, the table for the New Mexicans against to prevent gun violence is right over there. It's for the waving. So you can stop over there and see if there's anything that you could use. Another person I'd like to recognize, isn't that a great banner over here, Guns to Gardens? That's our logo was developed by Ken Gingrich. Wave your hand, Ken. And he's responsible for all the publicity too, the posters and handouts and so on. So thanks a lot, Ken. I'd like to introduce Tilka Vatula now from Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, who will introduce a couple of the high school students from Highland High School.
Thank you all for coming out. Hot day. Beth, Nairn, and Tao Vo are seniors at Highland High School. These remarkable women have taken a stand against gun violence. In doing so, they have shown the city of Albuquerque, their school, and the state of New Mexico the power of dedication, activism, and passion can have to educate and persuade. Their journey began with a tragic incident involving a fellow student. It continues today with their commitment to making our community a safer place. I'd like to introduce Beth and Tao. Come on up here. And thank you for sharing your experience and your strength and your hope with us. We're grateful you're here.
Thank you guys. Well, we're happy to be here. Basically, our journey kind of started when people we knew started getting involved with gun violence. Some of you may remember the shooting of Steve Garrick last summer, and a couple of Highland students were actually involved with that shooting. One of them who we knew personally, Tao was actually closer friends with him, and I've lost people in my family due to gun violence and some family friends as well. And this is a really far-reaching issue. It impacts all of us, whether or not directly. You see it in the news, surely. So we wanted to take action and start somewhere.
It's one thing to see all kinds of events happening on the news and you are very oblivious that even though it's happening around you, it's never going to happen to you and it's never going to affect you personally until it actually happens. Relating to the Steve Garrick shooting, there was 2 Highland High School students involved in the killing of Steve Garrick, and one of them was Ryan Archbeck. Ryan Archbeck was one of my very close friends. He was very nice, very dedicated to school, and he was overall a very amazing person, but just in that one reckless moment, he's now in jail due to that one event involving a gun. And because of that event, the issue of gun violence really actually hit home for me. It was just kind of an awakening moment to realize that someone you knew have been, even though he's on the other side of the gun issue, it was still very hard to actually accept that someone you knew is now in jail because of it.
So we decided to work with Manzano High DECA to help us begin our campaign because one of the girls we worked with, Jalissa Dandridge, was close friends with Jaden Chavez Silver and Jaquise Lewis, who we also lost over the past year, and their assistant principal was shot. So we felt that Manzano and Highland were both really affected by gun violence, especially over this past year, and it was time for us to stand up, speak out, and do something. We used the slogan, Words scar, bullets kill, shatter the silence. Because people tend to have this logic where, as a bystander, they're not really guilty because you saw something happening, but you weren't really involved, so it wasn't up to you to stand up and say something. But it's because of those actions that bystanders are almost as guilty as the person standing behind the gun pulling the trigger, because they could have done something to save a life, but instead they chose to stand back and do nothing. So we first started by reaching out to Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, which is a nonprofit organization across the United States, which overall just stands to make differences regarding gun violence, especially educating people, and they want to make changes in legislation. So we started work with Cheryl Hasse, who is the main social media and public relations coordinator for New Mexico, and she helped us to begin setting up the plans to host a walk, which we held back in November.
The walk is actually something Beth and I are both super proud of. We are both in DECA for the whole our whole high school career, and every single year we do something that affects the community or something that we felt really passionate about that people have to hear. And this year, due to so many recent shooting in the community alone, we decided to host a gun walk, and we called it the Gun Sense. We got in contact with KOAT, KRQE, and KOB, the biggest news station in New Mexico, in order for us to spread the words throughout New Mexico to gather people to come to Wilson Stadium so they can honor and in memory of those who we have lost recently due to gun violence. Walk participant walked from Wilson Stadium all the way to Los Altos Park, both places signifying recent shooting in the community alone. Pink balloons were also released in memory of Lily Garcia, the 4-year-old girl who we have lost a few months ago due to gun violence and road rage. We were able to gather over 150 walk participants from all over New Mexico because they've seen us on the news trying to advocate for this issue, and everyone was there supporting us from start to finish, and we were able to make a stand and show people that we are capable of making changes one step at a time.
So then in December, Moms Demand hosted a second walk, which we also helped advertise for, and over 70 people showed up for that one. And some walk participants included Michelle Lujan Grisham and a couple of our former city councilors, and as well as Pat Davis and Diane Gibson. So that was in memory of the Sandy Hook shooting. And we heard from people from other states, from other schools. I forgot the name of the school, but we were reached out to by a high school in Farmington who were impressed because they saw our walk on the news and they wanted resources to put something together for something similar. So, and we've heard from people in other states talking about our walk, and it's just amazing to be able to realize that you can start small. You know, we're just two high schoolers. We're not anybody like really out there that you would normally see on the news or that you would expect to start something. But all you have to do is stand up and say something, and you can start a movement. It's not as hard as it really seems like it's going to be. And we had surveys that we took at our school and at Manzano High School. We had 82% of students say that they knew someone who owned a gun, but only 43% felt like they were aware of gun violence in their community and how it really affected them. That's less than half. But after the walk, because we had so many people sharing their stories and speaking and sharing how it had affected them, that number jumped to 87%. and we hope to see that number keep rising. We didn't really have to do a lot. Jaquise Lewis's mother came to the walk and spoke, and that was how she heard about the walk. She saw us on the news and decided to show up, and she had a spot to speak. She and Jaden Chavez Silver's mother joined the Moms Demand support network after, and they began public outreach, and now they're public speakers for Moms Demand, just like we are.
What I actually realized when we are doing this project and throughout the whole project is when it comes to the issue of gun violence, we all surprisingly stand on the same side. When we went to our first Moms Demand Action meeting, there were NRA members, there were parents, there were moms and dads, and it's not just particularly moms, even though it's Moms Demand Action. And it's amazing to see, even though there are people who are pro-gun, they are anti-gun violence, and they do want this issue to end. And throughout this whole project that we did, in the end, we realized that as a community, we do stand together, and we are trying to make a difference one step at a time.
Yeah, I think that's about it. Just basically, it doesn't matter whether you're for or against guns. We're looking for the bloodshed to end.
Oh, I meant to do that. One of the more important issues having to do with gun violence is connected to domestic violence. I think we all know that, but a lot of times we forget that. When people tell me that they're fearful of people in other people in our community, so they're going to go out and get a gun to protect themselves, I have to remind them that they're much more likely to be shot by somebody in their own home than by a stranger. So we've invited a group from Albuquerque named Enlace to speak to us about the issues of gun violence and domestic violence. This is Hector Lozano from Enlace and Esteban Galvez.
Hello, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? How's the heat out there? All right. Is it hot or is it hot? It's very hot. Well, good afternoon. My name is Hector Lozano, and I just wanted to add this real quick since I did see one of my sisters out here, another veteran. I am a veteran from the Iraqi War, and I understand exactly what she's talking about when she meant that it's a big, huge struggle. Now, getting on to why we're here. I am very new to Enlace Comunitario, and I am extremely thankful for this organization because after coming back from Iraq, one of the biggest things that I encountered was just not wanting to be around people, locking myself up at home, suffering from PTSD, and not wanting to involve myself in anything. But I started going to school. I met this one young lady who sat right next to me. Her name is Ana. She's a big part of Enlace Comunitario. And she told me about a group called Entre Amigos. And it's just one of the many projects or many ways of that Enlace helps, people from, domestic violence. But it helped me get out of my home, and it allowed me to build up my self-esteem once again. It did this so well that I decided to involve myself with their mission statement and what it stands for. And I'll read this to you, like I said, because I'm so new to it. I'm still memorizing a bunch of things, but this is what it is. Enlace Comunitario is a social justice organization led by Latina women in central New Mexico and located in Albuquerque, of course. Our mission is to work to eliminate domestic violence in the Latino immigrant communities and promote healthy families through comprehensive domestic violence intervention services, preventative community education, policy advocacy, and leadership development. Our efforts benefit the entire community by bringing awareness about the magnitude of the problem, engaging the community in a process to find ways to eliminate domestic violence. Okay, so that's the main mission statement. Me, I am a part of a group called Promotores, okay? And what we do, we basically involve ourselves mainly with men. We know for a fact that unfortunately, most domestic violence acts are committed by males against females. That's just a fact, we have to live with that. So, of course, a male is going to feel a lot more comfortable talking to another male about this kind of a problem, whether I am a violent person or not. Okay? It's much harder for a female to come to a male and say, you know what, I'm a victim of domestic violence. Can you help me? What can I do? Okay? Or a violent man come over to another man and say, you know what, hey, I'm violent. But once you're in a group and we make the environment as such that a lot of confidentiality is made, we make everybody aware that whatever is said here is going to stay here. It's not going to be repeated. And we're going to help you. If you're a violent individual, of course, we want to help you eliminate that, okay? The other thing is that, let's say that you're not a violent person, but you do have a daughter, or you have a wife, or you have an aunt. You have a female that may be a victim of domestic violence, but you attending our services, you're a lot more aware of how domestic violence begins, and that it doesn't have to be something physical. You don't have to touch your wife. You don't have to touch your significant other for it to be violence. There's very many different types of domestic violence: physical, psychological, emotional, and one of the worst, which I barely began doing a little bit of research on, one called gaslighting, which I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this. It has got nothing to do with physical, psychological, or any kind of violence like that, but the significant other tries to make the other person go crazy, pretty much. Okay? Oh yeah. It begins something as simple as, you know what, taking air out of the tires of the car. So the wife notices that. She comes back home and like, oh my God. And this was an actual case. Babe, the tires, they're like low. And then you go out and no, they're not low anymore. The husband will go in there and pump them up with a portable compressor. So you begin to make your wife or your significant other go crazy by making her believe that she's imagining things, or that she's seeing things, that she's hallucinating. This specific case was brought on by an individual who his wife was going to divorce him and was going to take away the kids. So the only thing he could do was this, try to make her go nuts so that he wouldn't lose the kids. Okay? Enlace is also an organization that is non-for-profit, and it's been around now for about 15 years. And one thing that we do like to make very clear, our focus is mainly in the Hispanic community, okay? The immigrants that come across, whether it be legal or illegally, it doesn't matter, and need services. We have many different branches that provide different services, okay? Specifically those that are given to women that are victims of domestic violence. They come and request their services, and there's a large number of services we provide. The other one, which is what I'm a part of, is the services that we provide to men. Okay? Esteban?
Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Esteban Machado. And I wanted to thank Maria and George for the invitation. And just a little bit more to what Hector was explaining. When we're thinking about domestic violence, we see it something as of a psychological. There's something wrong with that guy. He has a problem. That's why he's being violent. The thing is, 1 out of 3 women are gonna be harassed sexually in their lives. There's been more women that died from domestic violence than from the last war that we had, the soldiers. So when we see these statistics, we then see that it's not a personal problem. It's actually a social problem. And it's more of a gender inequality. So once we understand that, that's when we have to do something about our culture, the way we think, the way we function. And that's why we have these groups, where we provide this safe space, and we talk about male socialization, the way that we've been raised and how we think and how we function as a male. So again, we'll leave the invitation open to who wants to participate. And if you guys have any questions, we're gonna be right there. And thanks again for having us here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to introduce a very special person. Her name is Chris Otto, and she joined New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, I think about a year ago. And she told me her story. And she's an example of when you're a victim of gun violence, how to be courageous and not to be quiet. And so she's going to talk to you about what she's been through and how it's affected her and her family. But I'm honored to introduce her. I'm honored to have her as a friend, and we are very honored to have her as a member of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. Chris Otto.
Thank you, Miranda. As she stated, my name is Chris Otto. I am a resident now of Santa Fe, but I haven't always been. I was in the Southern California area about 23 years ago. I was a president of the PTA. I was working at a school. I had 3 normal kids, high school, junior high, and elementary. And one Monday morning, I received a phone call that said, "Would you mind coming to the hospital? Your husband's been hurt." To make a long story short, he was a victim of gang shooting. He had been in a manhole when a person came up in a long coat in August with a gun underneath his overcoat and shot him through the head. This is a gang initiation. If you are not a member of a family, which I use that term lightly, if you are not a member of a family that is already involved with gangs, the way that you get into the gang is to kill someone. Take that in for a moment. It hurts so many. It hurts so many, not only the shooter, not only the shootee, but everyone involved. I didn't find out until about maybe 6 hours later that my husband was a victim of gang shooting, and I was devastated. I was working with so many youths at that point at a junior high. It turned out to be one of my students' brothers that had shot him. It just amazed me. It absolutely devastated us as a family. And that's what I'm here to talk about today, is how it affects a family. I had 3 children at that point. The oldest one was in high school. In dealing with 3 years of therapy, we were finally able to find out that the reason why she tried to commit suicide 3 times was because she felt responsible that she had not pulled over and helped her father when the ambulance was at the site that she drove past. She had no idea it was him. My middle daughter, she is now a principal at a school. I'm very, very proud of her. She closed down from the family and became a community member, but not of her family. My son, who was very young at that time, I didn't know how to handle him. I didn't know how to handle a boy losing his father. Even though he didn't lose him, he lost him in a lot of ways. When he was able to figure out that a man had done this to his father, he investigated, and he investigated heavily. The man was able to do a jailhouse confession about 4 years later. My son heard about this. He has plans of being in front of that jail when this man gets out of prison and probably kill him. And I said, it doesn't help. Choose love, choose love, choose love, choose love. And that's my message is to you guys today, is to please put away the guns. I don't want to hear any more news about a 2-year-old getting a hold of grandpa's gun that he feels he's going to protect the family with and killing herself. I don't want to hear about 49 people that get killed with an AR-47 because someone is homophobic who turns out to be a little bit homophobic or homo himself. It's ridiculous that these guns are out there. We need to forge them into tools. We really do. We really do need to turn them into tools. But my philosophy on this is generally to not have the families hurt anymore. I'm so sad that 49 people died in Orlando this last Sunday. but I'm more worried about the 53 families that are affected by the people that are surviving. It was hell. There's no other word about it. It was hell to deal with an individual who is surviving. He is now living, about a 10-year-old still. He travels. He is able to see my kids, and I call them my kids, not his anymore, because I got to divorce him, but the kids didn't. And they love their father still for what he is, but he is a different man. A gunshot wound to the head affects people's tenacity, tact, and temperament, particularly when it's in the frontal lobe. He is very untactful. His tenacity, he cannot put anything together. And he used to be somebody that would build sheds like this in a matter of days because he would love to do things like that. He was somebody that I loved and basically could probably stay my life with. But it changed. It changed dramatically. And as 97% of the people that are in traumatic brain injuries deal with, the families, I should say, we got a divorce. They normally don't stay together because that person changes. It's not Hollywood, folks. It's not Hollywood. They don't come out better. They don't come out better looking. They don't come back any nicer. They come back with an attitude that is so hard to deal with. And being the fact that he didn't even recognize me as his wife, I remember the first time that we walked up to our house, I got to bring him home from the hospital. I was so excited. And I go to unlock my front door, and he looks at me and he goes, "Why do you have a key to my home?" I said, "Well, 17 years of marriage, we kind of share the lock. We get to do that." And I was able to, at that point, realize that humor was going to be the only thing that was going to get me through this entire ordeal. But folks, I want to wrap this up by stating that if you have a gun in the house, please lock it. It's not for the sake that you don't ever want to use it. I don't want you to feel as though you have to use it, but please lock it up so a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a suicidal 13-year-old doesn't get a hold of it. Hormones are really, really, really strong at some point, and lack of self-esteem is very, very strong, and being bullied and being told that you are not a good person or you're not cute. A child can take that gun and use it on themselves. So please, folks, lock them up. Lock them up now and call your representative and tell them to please get these AR-47s off the streets. Thank you so much.
I'd like to remind you that we'll be having some food here in a while. If you're hungry right now, there are some pastries back in the area. And there's some fruit, melon, over here. And remember, we're composting everything today as much as possible. I'd like another woman who came today. Her name is Monica Salazar. And she's with a local healing community, but she's also a poet. And she said that she would like to share some of her poetry with us. So I said, sure enough. So here she is.
Thanks, George. All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having the event. It's really important to start dialoguing about gun violence, and I don't think we can talk about gun violence and not acknowledge how police brutality is complicit in that epidemic. And you know, part of the reason I write and I'm vocal is because you know, I've seen people wrongly killed through gun violence and police brutality, and I'm here to honor them with the poem. I've been wandering, wondering where to rest my head. I crash clumsily into the egos of strangers, still wondering where to rest my head. I am weary, and it is daily, and only some days a reprieve, a total surrender to all that is, and I am love, and I am a lover, and I believe like a child that if I hold you tight enough, strong enough, long enough, the fear will leave you, and it will leave me. But sometimes you can't unknow, baby. Sometimes we can't unknow, and I understand this. But don't let it steal your last happy breath. Even when I am afraid, I grab my own hand. I walk myself into the ether where the air is thin. But I learn to breathe like a yogi. I transcend this physical body all the time. You see, I've been preparing to die, knowing all along that you would steal my life from me like a thief for hire. Too black, too brown, too yellow, too red, too trans, too butch, too femme, too sexy, too sick, too old, too poor, too young, too addicted, too homeless, too PTSD, too easy to marginalize, demonize, dehumanize. When do you realize this animal is conscious, has family, has ancestors, has community, has heart, hurts and bleeds, heals and grows. Strip off your blue skin, step into your true skins, decide which paradigm you care to exist in. I wish you were a warrior. That is my prayer for you. That you weep when you kill, that in consuming the hearts of your prey, you might find your own, but not as long as you are a thief for hire.
Thank you, Monica. That was very powerful. I'm kind of speechless right now after listening to that. I think we'll take a short intermission. Well, since I'm MC, I'm telling you, we're going to take a short intermission right now. And we'll put up some music, and maybe you can have a chance to look at the forging or visit some of the tables around here. And when we come back again, we'll hopefully our dancers will be here.